Five Nights at Freddy's became one of the biggest indie horror games in the world after its explosion in popularity, after massive creators such as Markiplier made videos playing the game all the way back in 2014. Since then, the mainline franchise has continued to release even more games and grow in popularity. However, when something is as big as FNAF was, there were certain to be people who were inspired by the game and want to make their own twist on it. Thus, FNAF Fangames were born. Some made with varying levels of quality compared to others, but these community-made games are massively important to the entire franchise, and is a part of the reason why the name Five Nights at Freddy's has been able to maintain relevancy all these years later with fresh new fan games that give their own ideas and directions on how they wanted the FNAF story to be portrayed. Due to the fact that there are so many FNAF fan games, it's only natural that people want to know what the best FNAF game is, and I'm sure you'll find a lot of different answers from different people, but I'm sure that the name Five Nights at Candy's would definitely be in the conversation, especially the third game that is very highly praised by the community as a whole. FNAC was even popular enough to have been included in the Fazbear's fanverse, where the creator Emil Mako obtains funding straight from Scott Cawthon himself, and is actually able to sell the game under the authorization from Scott. Five Nights at Candy's is a game that I have played and enjoyed all the way back when it was originally released, but I'm here today to answer the question of whether Five Nights at Candy's was overrated. We'll be going over all three main games in the series and talking about the rough gameplay elements and my overall enjoyment of it. If you want me to go over the most underrated FNAF fan game next, then leave a like and let me know in the comments what you think is the most overrated FNAF fan game. So we start with FNAC 1. I'm using the remastered one for gameplay, as it's the same as the first game, just with nicer graphics. The first entry in the series is very similar to the first FNAF game. Some may even call it a FNAF clone, but I wouldn't go that far personally. You play as a security guard working at Candy's Burgers and Fries, and have to survive the killer animatronics attempting to enter your office. The whole gimmick with FNAC is that most of the characters have white glowing eyes. This can be seen on the cameras and outside your door when they attempt to enter your office. When you see their eyes in the doorway, you need to close the door to make them leave. The characters Candy, Chester, Penguin, and Cindy all use this gimmick and will attempt to get into your office through your either left or right door. This sounds cool in concept. Being able to see the white glowing eyes of the animatronics staring you down sounds scary as anything, but when it comes to the gameplay, it just makes the game feel pretty easy, as you immediately know when to close the door when their eyes appear in the doorway. However, it does make for some cool camera shots, being able to see their eyes in the darkness. If you didn't know, the cameras in FNAC work a bit differently from usual FNAF fan games. When you click onto a camera, it will be completely blacked out. To be able to see the camera, you need to click on the cam again and it activates night vision, but this drains power from your power meter. So once again, in concept, being able to see the eyes of the animatronics in the dark cameras looks pretty cool yet terrifying. But it makes the game a lot easier, as it means the night vision mode on the cameras is completely useless, is what I would say if it wasn't for two more animatronics that I purposely didn't mention before. To start things off simple, I'll talk about Old Candy. Old Candy works the same as all the other animatronics, in the sense that he will attempt to enter your office through your door. However, the twist with Old Candy is that he has no eyes, therefore meaning that you won't be able to tell when he's at your doorway from looking in the office. This means that finally, the night vision mode has a use, as you'll need to check to see if Old Candy is at your door in the cameras. This was a very much needed inclusion to give the gameplay that added difficulty. However, Old Candy doesn't completely solve this issue, as he only enters your office through the left hallway, meaning that all you need to do is check that left hallway cam every so often, and he's no threat to you at all. This means that this is one of only two cameras that you actually need to check whilst playing the game. The second camera I'll get onto in a second. So as much as I like Old Candy and how he goes against the usual gimmick of the game, it just fails to really add much interest to the game, as it really isn't hard to deal with him at all. This brings us to our final character from the main cast in Five Nights at Candy's, Blank. Blank resides in the drawing room and works as the Foxy of this game. He will go through multiple phases before disappearing and attempting to break the glass in front of you. To stop this, you must close the shutter. If you fail to stop Blank in time, you die. you witness probably one of the worst jump scares in fan game history, but Blank gives the gameplay a more complete feel, as you now have a setup very similar to FNAF 1. Having to check on Blank was exactly what this game needed to make sure the gameplay isn't completely stale. Although it may not exactly be a difficult game, I personally still really enjoy it, and think although it's simple, it works well and flows together decently nice. But we aren't done talking about this game. There's one final secret character that is added in Night 5, but will only become a real threat in Night 6. He is called the Rat, and firstly, I want to say that his design is amazing and super unnerving. It makes you wonder why anyone would make something that looks like that. It just makes you feel so uncomfortable. The Rat has no eyes like old Candy, but what sets the Rat apart from him is the fact that he can attack from both doors, and he is very quick. This man can move from cameras like no one's business, and is very quick to punish players who aren't fast enough to stop him. The Rat is the perfect inclusion, as you now have to make the effort to look in both hallways in the cameras to see where he is, and be able to do so quickly or you die, and taking into account that you also still have to deal with all the other animatronics at the same time, it creates tense and stressful nights. It's unfortunate that some of the best gameplay only ends up being showcased right by the end, as before this point, the game isn't exactly all too difficult. Overall, FNAC 1 is pretty solid, and it's a pretty good fan game, and follows the usual FNAF formula with its own adjustments here and there. This game done well for Emil, but it was clear that past this point, he would probably have to try and come up with some new gameplay ideas going forward for future entries. Now, this is where we get onto FNAC 2, which surprisingly to some is the game I probably have played the most out of all the Five Nights at Candy's games. I used to enjoy this game quite a lot back in the day when I was just but a young Donny. However, looking back on it in present day, I am just unable to find the enjoyment I once found in this game due to the gameplay. FNAC 2 takes place in some factory that contains the now more broken down versions of the original cast. The gameplay really isn't fun, I'm just going to come out and say it. It consists of using phones on the cameras to lure or scare the animatronics. The concept is that you have to flash your light to see if there are any animatronics in front of you, and if there is, you call a phone connected to a camera and they'll go to that camera, a bit like FNAF 3. The only exception to this rule is Chester and Penguin. You use the phone to scare Chester from climbing into the vents, and Penguin works like Phantom BB, appearing on your camera, and if you look at him for too long, he disables your cameras. This gameplay is flawed in so many ways. I mean, there is literally no reason for you to ever not be on your cameras. You could spend the whole night ringing random phones, and you will still win easily. The fact that everyone pretty much has the same mechanic just makes it a snooze fest, and makes it a pretty easy game to beat. Night 6 attempts to do what the previous game did, adding the Rat and a new animatronic called the Cat that are hyper aggressive, and they can use all of the mechanics from the other characters. But that's it, it's just the Rat and the Cat, with absolutely no one else, and the same tactic of ringing random phones still works in this night as well. So it just fails to give the player a real challenge compared to how FNAC 1's 6th night works. FNAC 2 really isn't a great FNAF fan game, and I really wish it was, because in concept, it sounds like it could be really cool. Being hunted down by broken down versions of the main cast in an abandoned factory just sounds like a really creepy experience, but it just doesn't come out as good in reality. This leaves us with the third entry to the series, FNAC 3. FNAC 3 is the standout in the series, and takes more of a FNAF 4 approach, being hunted down in your bedroom. In this game, there are only two characters, Monster Rat and Monster Cat. The models for both of these characters are absolutely amazing, and some of the best in the entire FNAF franchise, mainline or fan game. They are simply that good. There are two main segments when it comes to gameplay. There's the 8-bit mini games that you play after nights, and they take place in the dreamscape or inside the Rat and Cat's restaurant. These segments push the story of the game, and it is expertly done, I must say. I've always loved how Scott originally used these old Atari-esque mini games to tell the story, so it's really nice to see Emil do something similar. Now, the night gameplay consists of a few different things. First off, you have a tape recorder that when you play makes the night go faster. However, it will need to be rewound every so often. Monster Cat will attempt to get into your room through your door, closet, and wardrobe. To stop this, you must shine your light at him to make him leave. However, if the rat manages to get into your room, he goes into what I'll call the dance phase. He will be stood in your room and you'll have to shine your light directly into his face. However, he is somewhat smart and will try to avoid your light by moving in a triangular pattern. This is why I call it the dance phase. After continuing to shine the light in the rat's face, he will crawl under your bed, onto the bed phase. You will need to look under your bed to see whether he is on the left or right side. Whatever side he is on, you will need to return to your bed and look in the opposite direction for a few seconds until you hear a sound cue, at which point you will look back in the other direction and shine the light into his face once again to make him leave your room, sending you back to square one of scanning your room. This is the process you must go through multiple times every night to survive against the monster rat. So, what about Monster Cat, you ask? He will slowly appear on the far left or right side of the room. Shine your light at him to make him disappear. So that's everything when it comes to the main mechanics. And although I think it's really cool to have you stand off against Monster Rat in your room and having him try to avoid your light, I will say it loses that terror aspect early on, as it just becomes second nature having to deal with it constantly. I also feel like Monster Cat is hardly a threat, as you'll be scanning your room most of the night anyways, and you'll accidentally scare him away without even realizing. For the final night of this game, I want to quickly mention that there is a super ridiculously hard boss fight against what is called Vinny in this game. And he has the rat's mechanics, but it says he will move his head around like mental and constantly move around your room in that standoff phase. And this is honestly so difficult to try and beat. So yeah, if you're looking for a challenge, Vinny is the guy. Overall, I do think FNAF 3 is a very good FNAF fan game, but I personally don't see it being as amazing as some people say it is. I enjoy the game, but I don't think it's the most amazing thing ever. Which leaves us with the question that we were looking to answer at the beginning of this video. Is Five Nights at Candy's the most overrated FNAF fan game? And if you want the most obvious answer, then it's all down to personal preference. But for me, I think that although Emil has made two really good and enjoyable fan games that I do rate, I feel that they are maybe a bit overhyped in some regards. I want to be clear, I'm not saying these games are bad in any way, because that would be completely false information. I just believe that there are games that are better than it. However, there is a FNAC 4 in the makings, which is a part of the fanverse. So I am extremely excited to see what it is like when it releases. I really doubt this is the case, but if you're watching this video, Emil Mako, I want to say thank you for creating the FNAC franchise, and keep up the hard work on FNAC 4. It will pay off. Well, that's all from me today then. Have a good day, evening or night, wherever you are, and I'll see you in the next one.